When Israel's Prime Minister visited Washington last week on the eve of the Purim holiday, he gave President Obama what he considered a symbolic gift, a copy of the Old Testament book of Esther. Netanyahu called it background reading on Iran, since its story concerns relations between Jews in the Persian Empire some 2,500 years ago. It's considered by scholars to be mostly fiction, but for Netanyahu, Esther represented justification for his stance against modern Iran.
Israel must reserve the right to defend itself. And after all, that's the very purpose of the Jewish state, to restore to the Jewish people control over our destiny.
But Netanyahu's controversial reading of history, even his fight to preserve the state of Israel, are questioned by many of Judaism's own religious authorities.
This is against the will of the Almighty, and it is not what it means to be a Jew.
On the threat from Iran and President Ahmadinejad,
he gives charity to the Jewish communities, and the words wipe out. He constantly says that Iran doesn't have a history, and he's not talking about harming anybody. He says that God will not allow this crime to happen. We concur with him that Jews are in a danger because there is Zionism, and because it says in the Torah, if you rebel against God, it will not be successful, and it will be catastrophic results. And Zionism has brought catastrophic results, and it can be much worse.
Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, Rabbi David Weiss explains why Zionism and Judaism are not necessarily the same thing. Rabbi, first of all, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be on your show.
Your most distinctive feature that I have noticed in seeing you in media are the signs that you wear on your lapel. Please explain.
This is a sign that conveys the message of what it means to be a Jew. As it says, a Jew, not a Zionist, and pray for the speedy, peaceful dismantlement of the state of Israel. And then it's repeated, nkusa.org, our site, for people to go further and see it, their website, and then to see it's in Arabic, the same message. And basically it means that people, unfortunately, around the world see somebody as I am dressed, and they think that automatically I am dressed very religiously. I'm definitely a strong supporter of the state of Israel and of the occupation of the people of Palestine. And in truth, there could be nothing further from the truth.
In truth, what you want is the speedy, peaceful dismantlement of the state of Israel.
Because it's contradictory. Judaism is subservience to the Almighty, practiced for thousands of years, a covenant with God to be subservient to Him. And Zionism is a new movement, a relatively new movement, a transformation from the religion into a base, materialistic, nationalistic movement to have a piece of land which is forbidden for the Jews.
Okay, we'll have to unpick this piece by piece, I think, because for most people, the idea of the state of Israel is fixed within a very rigid framework, and what they understand about the existence of Israel is by and large very uniform, at least according to what you read in newspapers. So let me try and get your position clear on this. What you're saying is that the existence of Israel is somehow against your religion.
The Jewish religion forbids, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, we were given an edict, a decree by God, it's a prophecy of King Solomon, that we are not to attempt to recreate our sovereignty. Even 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty, even in an uninhabited land, is expressly forbidden. And we Jews wait for the day when God will make a miracle where all humanity will serve Him in harmony. We won't have to convince an atheist that there is a God. Everybody will recognize God, and then we will all go up and serve Him. Prior to that event, we are expressly forbidden to try to attempt to make any Jewish nationalism sovereignty, and this was respected and upheld by Jews throughout the trials and tribulations of the Inquisition, the Crusades, and every time period of Judaism when they were easily capable of buying land. They never did it because they understood this is against the will of the Almighty, and it is not what it means to be a Jew. Once again,
This is not an opinion that you hear expressed very often. Are you in a minority? Is this simply your reading of the Torah?
No, this is the view of Judaism and Jews who are practicing the religion around the world. You will find invariably any religious community that is very religious. We carry around, first we have called the Rabbis speak out. This is the leaders of Judaism from Sephardic, Ashkenazic, in other words, European, Middle Eastern, any country, the rabbis, when Zionism came, the concept of Zionism was developed, the Jewish rabbinical authorities universally said, no, this is forbidden for us to do. The reason being that it is not the concept of subservience to God, it's a nationalism, and in its actions, when it comes into fruition, when they created the state, the concept of stealing from people, killing, stealing, is all forbidden according to the Torah. So in every facet, Zionism is a rebellion against the command of God.
But what about the argument that a lot of them make, and that is that the Bible specifically says that this land was given to the Jewish people by God, and therefore it belongs to them?
That is why Zionism decided, when they're making their national home, to make it in Palestine, because really the fathers of Zionism in the 1895, in the 1890s, when they made their first meetings, they discussed making their national home in Uganda, in Patagonia, and because they were anti-religious, Theodor Herzl, Ben Gurion, well, at that time Jabotinsky, Theodor Herzl, these people detested the religion, as we have a compilation of their writings. In his own diary, Theodor Herzl wrote that Jews should convert to Christianity. That would be the solution to the Jewish problem. And it should be done in pride and music. On page 14 of his diaries, we will get to that with God's help. And he didn't circumcise his son. He openly wrote about this in the newspapers, that he's not circumcising his one son in the hands. So they detested religion. They were looking for a practical area of, that they would flourish, a land that would be fruitful and to create a land. But then they realized that practically speaking, you need a massive backing as far as money goes, and the way to get that from the world is to go to Palestine and claim that they're doing God's will, they're the beginning of God's redemption, and therefore people should support them, because in the Torah it says that God gave the Jewish people the land.
But Zionism also claims exception because of the Holocaust. Now, you just attributed the phrase to Theodor Herzl, the solution to the Jewish problem,
yes.
And that will have raised ears all over the world, because that's the phrase that most people attribute to Hitler. Now, the idea that the Jews need a safe country in order to prevent the possibility of another Holocaust, in order to solve the persecution of Jews throughout millennia, is one of the founding principles of Israel. You don't think that holds any water either?
The Holocaust was God's will, and we don't question God. God is compassionate and so forth, but we have to be introspective, understand why it came. We believe that God will be exacting with the punishment for the Nazis, but at the same time to take the issue of the Holocaust and to take that and to use it to rebel against God, when God specifically told us, do not attempt to make your own state, and to use that to take the land from the Palestinian people is taking the people that died because they were Jewish, and to sort of dig them up and use them to rebel against God. It couldn't be anything worse for these people who died as Jews.
But you have to understand that the desire to be with a like community, the desire to commune with people of the same religion is a very strong one, and to have a homeland has got to be
emotional feeling.
But you're also saying that a defining feature of being a Jew is exile.
A defining feature is accepting that there is a ruler to the world who's compassionate, and it is medicine for the Jewish people, as Rabbi Samson Hirsch, the head of the German community, wrote, that God is compassionate, and his will, since the destruction of the temple, was that he's good in his punishment. He wanted us to break our haughtiness, so he had us dispersed amongst the nations. At the same time, it was accomplishing a blessing for the world if we would be following the Judaism, because we are people who would be teaching the world of compassion, of serving God. So it serves twofold. It serves two purposes. But unfortunately, if we don't do what we're supposed to be doing as Jews, it doesn't accomplish that purpose.
I'm not a learned scholar of matters Jewish, so I can't argue with you, but I know there are many who would. There is a strain within Israel itself, within the state of Israel, started, I think, by Rabbi Kook, perpetuated by a number of names in modern Judaism, who say, no, it's perfectly compatible with the writings of the Torah that we have a state of Israel, and in fact, it not only makes political sense, it makes religious sense too.
Yeah, well, that is why I said I'm not requiring anybody to become a scholar in Judaism, but if you just step out of the box, let us just say, and go to Jerusalem, go to New York, go to in London, Stamford Hills, the religious communities, the Ivy League of Judaism, the rabbinical colleges, you will see that the most religious communities, every one of them they are anti-Zionist, and they, for instance, in Williamsburg, you won't find one Israeli flag. The majority of Jews in Jerusalem and Palestine won't send their children to the army, and they don't fly Israeli flags on their buildings because it is contradictory. It is diametrically opposite.
What about the settler movement? I mean, they present themselves as being religiously based and very fundamental.
Yes, there is the issue that they fuse together Zionism. They've hijacked the name Israel, the Star of David. They're using this, and what they're doing is they've been able to, by incorporating the Jewish feelings, for instance, they call themselves the beginning of God's redemption. They do agree that we were sent into exile by God. The ones who aren't non-believers, which many of them are, but the ones who do believe, they say, yes, God sent us into exile, but we are the beginning of God's redemption. And they've been able to ensnare the youth, mostly these are all from, almost entirely from non-religious homes or marginally religious. They are not the mass, the general populace of Jewish religious people. These you will find and call it the silent majority, all the communities that are opposed to these settlers. These settlers are definitely a minority that are always in your face. You will see them because they're up front. They're agitating, they're creating this terrible situation, but they don't represent Judaism. But being that they created in Palestine, their homeland, so now they're breaching every concept of thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, and it's being done creating rivers of blood because of hate around the world.
Now, you used the phrase a moment ago, taking land from the Palestinians, which again is a problematic one for a lot of Western-educated Jews and non-Jews alike. There is an argument, which is very much in the news right now, that there is no such thing as a Palestinian people, and there is an argument that says the lands that we are talking about never belonged to anybody called Palestinians. So what do you mean by taking Palestinian land?
You know, the Zionists would love to get into some technical jargon, when you say there's not a Palestinian people and the land, we're talking as individual dwellers in Deir Yassin, in town after town and town, that we have many of our Jewish colleagues who are presently still living in the occupied Palestine there, in Jerusalem, and they remember how they lived in total harmony with their Muslim and Arab neighbors, and they live there. The majority of people reside in Palestine.
But what do you say to Newt Gingrich, who says these are all Arabs? They're not Palestinians, they're simply Arabs.
Again, these are technical terms to confuse the person. The fact is the majority of people were non-Jews. They were Muslims and Arabs living in this area, whether it would be under Turkish or British mandate. That's neither here nor there. But they are the indigenous people who they either left because they were attacked as in Deir Yassin, or they ran away out of panic because they've seen what happened in these towns. And therefore, as a Jew, which is people call human rights, we call godliness, we are forbidden to steal their land.
So let me just paraphrase, if I could, what you told us so far. The state of Israel has no legitimacy. It shouldn't exist at all. That Jews are responsible for rivers of blood, as you put it, in the Palestinian lands. That the Holocaust is not sufficient reason to override the basic Jewish premise that the Jews should not have a land of their own. I may not have quoted you entirely accurately, but even if someone like me were to even hint at thinking like that, I would be branded anti-Semitic. I would be vilified in the mainstream media.
Yes,
so the question is, are you anti-Semitic?
That is the beautiful ploy of Zionism, that they can intimidate anybody who stands in opposition to their blatant, inhumane treatment of the Palestinians. And mind you, we will show you with God's help that they're brutally beating the Jewish inhabitants, who nobody can accuse us of being armed or militant, and yet you can see that the Jews are brutally beaten simply because they're standing in Palestine, because there's masses, tens of thousands of Jews who stand out and demonstrate, and they get brutally beaten because they're opposing the existence of state, and they want the world to know.
They get brutally beaten by the Israelis. I could see it on our site and links, but you can just see, and simply they're standing there, non-militant, who never carry arms, and this is